Welcome to Frost Astrophotography and a PixInsight tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to walk through all the steps of processing an HA-LRGB image of M31, the Andromeda galaxy. To start off this tutorial, I'm going to load the images. I have registered LRGB and HA light frames. As you're going to see throughout this tutorial, I do like to save images for each step so that I can go back to that image even after I've closed the PixInsight software. Starting off with that, I'm going to do a screen transfer function on these images. We have the H alpha, the luminance, and the red, green, and blue. And I'm now going to do a dynamic crop. As you can see here, the H alpha has the most stacking artifacts to the right here. So I'm going to open up a dynamic crop session, and I'm going to make adjustments to the H alpha. Something like that. And important now, before I execute this, I'm going to use these settings on all of the other frames so that I get the exact same crop. So I'm going to take the blue here, for example. I'm going to take the triangle and drag a new instance of this crop over here. And I'm going to set it to blue, and I'm going to name it DC for dynamic crop. So I know that I've done it. And I'm going to save this in the linear folder. I'm going to name it simply blue DC. And I'm going to take the next the green. I'm going to save that as well. The luminance. The red. And finally, executing the H alpha as well. And I'm going to save that into the folder processing. And I do like to save copies, like I said, for each step, and also change identifier so that I know exactly what step the image is from in the processing flow. The next step in the processing workflow that I use is to do a dynamic background extraction. For that, I want to start with the frame that has the most details. That is usually a luminance frame. So I'm going to open my luminance and I'm going to open the dynamic background extraction process. Now I do have shortcuts to the processes, including settings on the workspace here to the right, and you can also open them through the processing menu option, of course. But I do recommend saving an instance when you have configured it for your convenience. And you can do that by editing the settings and then simply use the triangle to drag an instance onto your workbench, and then right click on it and set icon identifier and select name that you can relate to. Now I have made some adjustments to the default values. I've changed the tolerance, and I've also made some changes to the minimum sample weight here. Another important thing to know about this tool is that you want to have the target image correction set to subtraction in order for it to work. If you want to, you can always use replace target image, but I like to have a new image made so that I can quickly run it again on the original image if I want to. We can zoom in and I will show you how to place it. So simply click here somewhere on the background. As you can see, it's fairly white. If I place a sample on a star, you will see that it is completely black. And if it's partially placed on a star, it also is displaying black. So you don't want that. You want to place these samples on the background, and also not on any nebulosity or the galaxy, for example. You will also see that it is black here. So simply place some samples on the image. I like to evenly distribute these. I would say to have a fairly good amount of samples in the image, but you don't want to overdo it at the same time. But mind the galaxy, of course. Make sure that you have samples placed here evenly spread out. And not on the galaxy, of course. If you let the process generate these, you might need to check them anyway, and to check to see if they're really placed on the background or if they're placed on a star, then you need to touch the sample point, and I figure you will spend the exact same time as if you were to place them manually yourself. So I kind of like to do it this way. And I'm fairly happy with that. I'm going to just place a few more up here in this corner. Like that. Before proceeding now, it's very important that you use this triangle to save an instance of this, because that will also save the sample points and their placement. I'm going to do that, drag that onto the screen here as a temporary measure, and then I'm going to execute this on the luminance. It generated a new frame for me here now. I think that turned out really well. It did remove most of the background, so I'm fairly happy with that. We'll change that, and I'm going to save this. Place that up there. Continuing on with the red, I'm opening up my saved instance and executing it. Stretch, check it out, it looks nice. Setting the identifier and saving this file. Putting up there. Now we're going to do the first step in the special integration of this narrowband data. I'm actually going to use the red and the H alpha. As you can see here, I have some regions of H alpha here, basically this ring. And that is what I want to use to make the red H alpha regions really pop in the final image. Looking at the original red frame here, you don't see much of those active regions here. So that's what I want to incorporate. I've tried several different ways of integrating. There are some options to do it semi-automatically. There is a script here, for example, that is called LRGB combination, and here you can combine an RGB image with narrowband channels. But I found that the results is not what I like. So I'm not going to use this today. What I am going to use is I'm going to extract the H alpha regions. And for that, I'm going to use a pixel math formula to basically extract everything from the red frame, from the H alpha frame, and then take what is left of the H alpha data and put that back into the red frame here. And then I can move on to make my LRGB image. I'm going to start off with a pixel math here. Now we're going to use a single expression, and I want to create a new image. I also want this to be grayscale because this is not stretched yet. We're still in the linear phase here. And I have a formula here that I've copied. So what I want to use is the H alpha that is called HADCDBE. And I want to remove the information from the red frame. So RDCDBE here. Now there are several ways to do this formula, and I've seen examples where you use the bandwidth of the filter, 7 nanometers for example, and incorporate that into the formula, and it's way more advanced. But I've been looking at some other videos, and there's particularly one that I got inspired from, and in that video they were using just a simple factor. So remove red from H alpha, multiply it with a factor, and you have to experiment with this. I'm going to show you. Start off with 0.20 for example. I'm going to execute this and show you what it does. So in this example here, I'm going to stretch it. You can see that a lot of information has been removed from this H alpha in comparison to the original one. But not everything, because if I have information left here from the red, or information that is present in both H alpha and the red, it's going to display as very, very red in the final image. And that is not good. Then the core will be completely red, and I will have a reddish hue on the entire image. So that was not enough. I'm going to try 25 here, see what that does. Well, some more, but not enough. So I think I had it at 35. So now it's starting to look good. I'm going to see if that was maybe too much. 33. Now you see, you still have some core in here. You don't want that. You want the core to be completely gone. So maybe 34. No, I think we'll end up with 35 in the end. Anyway, yep. As you can see here now, you have the original H alpha here on the right, and you have the H alpha regions separated, and all of the other information from the red frame has been removed from this image. And the goal here, of course, is also to remove as much of the stars as possible, because if you have stars left here, you might end up with a problem of getting red color added to the stars when you combine this later on, but I think we'll be good here. So the next step here then is to basically add this information here on the right to the red frame here on the left. For that, I have a new formula, and we're going to replace the name. So red DC DBE is the name of my red frame. So I want to take the red frame. I want to add my new H alpha. I'm going to set that to I'm going to call it H alpha extracted. I'm going to save that. So I want to HA. So the formula is that I want to combine my red channel or frame with the new H alpha extracted, but I want to remove a medium of the same H alpha extracted as well, and then multiply it by a factor that should be somewhere in between 1 and 2, I would say. You have to experiment if you don't use enough. If you have it at 1, for example, the H alpha regions might not pop as well as you want. If you use too much, you will get interference or some extra red in your image when you combine it in the end. But I think a 1.5 value is good. So I'm going to execute this. And stretch it. And I can compare now. Let's see. Use this section here. As you can see here, you have a lot of nebulosity details in the image to the right, and you don't have that much details in the image to the left here. Just for the fun of it, I can use 2 here to demonstrate. One to the left and 2 to the right. You can see that it is it's adding more, but it's also eating away just a little bit of the red frame, I would say. I'm going to go with the 1.5 version, and I'm going to set the identifier to RHA. And I'm going to save that. So now I know that I have the RHA image here, and I can also save the original one. Next step in this linear phase is to do a linear fit. And this will equalize the brightness in the images. I'm going to use the luminance as my reference image. So I'm going to change the name here. I'm going to type in LF, that stands for linear fit. I'm going to save a copy of this as well. I'm going to select that image as my reference image. And then I'm simply going to walk through. I don't really need to edit this original red now, but it could be nice to have in the end. So I'm going to do it anyway. So I'm going to execute the linear fit here on this image, and then on all of the other images as well. The next step in my processing is to do a deconvolution. What I need for a deconvolution is basically a PSF, and that is the average star model in the image that is used here in this process. I also want to use de-ringing to make sure that I don't get any strange halo effect around the stars. And for that, I also need a local support file. So that is basically a star mask. So what you can do here now is that you can, first of all, use StarNet 2 to create a star mask for each of these frames. Now that will take quite a while, so I'm going to show you the first one, and then you can do the other ones yourself. And I'm also going to show you the quickest way of making this PSF. That is done by using the script here and the easy processing suite and the easy decon. Now I'm not actually going to use the deconvolution in this script, but I'm going to use the PSF function. So I'm going to select the first frame here. I'm going to click on deconvolution, and I'm going to use the generate PSF file. And I'm going to do that for all images. When it's completed on the first image, I'm going to select the next, and I'm going to go through all of my frames to do that. The Easy Decon has finished making the PSF files. Now, in the interest of time, I didn't generate a PSF for all of the light frames, just the ones that I need one for. So close this. I have 4 files here now, and I'm going to save these. And I'm going to minimize them. So I'm going to close some files that I don't need. I don't need that. and I don't need the H alpha anymore. I'm just not going to process those for the next steps because it will take a lot of extra time. So I'm going to skip that. I'm going to place these up here. So these are PSF files for the LRGB. Now the next thing that we need to create in order to use deconvolution is star masks. And I'm going to use StarNet 2 for that. That will take a lot more time than using the simple process of star mask, but the result is much better, I would say, with StarNet. So I think we will use that. When StarNet 2 came, you have the option of using linear data, but I feel that that feature is not optimal, so I'm going to manually stretch the images, or I'm going to use the screen transfer function and copy that over to histogram transformation. So I'm going to make a copy, and I'm going to open up histogram transformation. I'm going to remove the screen transfer function here. I'm going to stretch it again. I'm going to take the triangle here, and that will take the stretch parameters. I'm going to drag that over to the histogram transformation and drop it down on the gray bar here. And that will copy the screen transfer function. Then I'm going to take the triangle from the histogram and I'm going to drop it over to this. Now it's all white, and that's because you have two stretches on it. So I'm going to reset this, and now I'm left with the non-linear version, the stretch version of this luminance. And I can now take the StarNet 2 and apply it. The first star mask, I'm going to rename that to Luminance Star Mask. I'm going to save it, even though I won't be needing it after deconvolution. It might be nice to have it, so I'm gonna place it up there. I don't need the starless version right now because we're going to do starless versions later. So moving on to the next, we have the red and H alpha combination. I'm going to take this, reset that as well, and stretch it again, and like before, copy settings and stretch that, and then remove the screen transfer function. Then we have the nonlinear version, and we execute StarNet on this, and then I will do the next two as well, and then come back in this video to the next step. Finally, I really need a faster computer. The star masks are finished. Now I have 4 star masks and 4 PSF files. And that is for all of the 4 frames that I need to process further in this workflow. I'm going to start the deconvolution. And the first thing I want to do is I want to open my light frame and start with that. You could use a preview window now. So first of all, I'm going to select external PSF. I'm going to click the little window and I'm going to select my luminance PSF file. I'm going to go down to and expand the ringing. I'm going to click on local support and I'm going to select the luminance star mask. Now I'm not exactly sure which settings are default, but I'm going to use the regularized Richardson-Lucy algorithm with 10 iterations and with the luminance as target. I don't have any settings modified here, I think, but you can compare these with the settings in your process. The settings that you do need to adjust is the global dark here. You might need to adjust this up or down depending on how much deconvolution you want and making sure that you don't get any strange halo effects or rings around your stars. Now this will take a while, so the best thing is to make a preview window or two. So you can click on the preview feature up here and make a preview window. Make one for stars and you can make another one to include some details in your image. I think I'm going to start with 55 here, 0.0055 for the global dark setting. And the local amount is 0.70. I'm going to select the preview one and I'm going to apply. You can toggle on and off using Control Shift Z. So this is before and after, before and after. So you can see a slight sharpening effect. Let me try 80. Before, after, before, after. I'm going to try to run that here as well on the detail view. You can see it much better here. We are reducing the stars a bit and you get a much sharper image here. So I'm thinking I'm fairly happy with that. Consider that you only want a slight deconvolution, or at least that is what I want, because you don't want to overdo it this early into the linear phase. I'm going to apply this to the entire image. We can zoom in to check to see the results here. I'm going to undo it and then redo it. And I'm happy with that result. So I'm going to delete the previews. And I'm going to set the identifier to decom and save an image. So since my light frames are fairly identical, I would say, I'm going to use the same settings. I'm going to trust these. I'm not going to do previews on each of these frames. I'm simply going to swap out the external PSF file here. Now I have the red and H alpha. So I'm going to select the red and H alpha PSF, and I'm going to select the red and H alpha star mask. Then I'm simply going to execute this deconvolution on the entire image. And that means that we are finished with the deconvolution. We can now move on to multi-scale linear transformation tool, and this is used to remove the noise from the background in the image. Now what we need to do here is that we only want to apply the multi-scale linear transformation tool to the background. So we would need to make a mask to protect the galaxy in this case. So we can use the luminance as a mask here. I'm going to drag this onto the desktop to make a copy of it. And I'm going to do exactly what I did earlier when making star masks. So I'm going to remove the auto stretch, and I'm going to copy these settings and drag it back to the image. So now we basically have a clone of our luminance to be used as a mask, and I can use that for the green and blue as well. But for the H alpha, I think I want to have a copy of the H alpha, so I'm going to repeat the procedure for that. Make sure that this is reset. Stretch it and then copy the settings over. And now I have a stretched H alpha red to use as a mask as well. I'm going to start with the luminance. So I'm opening up the copy of the luminance. I'm going to drag that over and drop it here to be used as a mask. Now I want to protect the foreground here, so I will only apply the noise reduction to the background. So I'm going to have to invert this mask. I'm going to go to mask and click on invert. I'm also going to remove the viewing of the mask. So I'm going to click show mask. The mask is still active, as you can see here by the color of this tab. And now I'm going to run, I've pre-programmed here. I want to have 4 layers, and I want to have some parameters for each layer. And you can play with these settings, but I would suggest just copying mine to start with, and then you can make small adjustments if you want to. So for the first layer, I have a noise reduction, 3, 0.5, and 3 iterations. And then I have 2, 0.5, and 2 iterations. 1, 0.5, and 2 iterations, and finally 0.5, 0.5, and 1. That is basically all the settings that you need to do. Just make sure that you have a starlet transform as an algorithm and the dyadic layers settings as well. Another thing to remember is that you want to run this without the screen transfer function active. Don't ask me why, that's what I'm hearing in other videos as well. So I'm going to remove this. And I'm going to apply this to the image. And when the MLT has finished, you can stretch the image again. And now I can inspect to see what happened. If we zoom in here, you can see the after. I'm going to click undo to make sure we can look at the before. So this is the before. You can see that there is a lot of noise here. And after. So I'm very happy with that. So I'm going to remove this mask. I'm going to change the identifier to MLT to indicate that I have run the MLT on this file here. I'm going to do the same for the red H alpha. I'm going to take this, apply it as a mask. Going to invert the mask, and I'm going to remove the visibility. I'm going to remove the screen transfer function and then execute. And when that is finished, I can do another screen transfer function and check the results. You can see you have a lot of noise in this image here. So. MLT, remove the mask, and save this. Now for the green and blue, I'm going to use the luminance as a mask. We've reached the final step of the linear phase, and we can remove these two images. We don't need them anymore. We don't need to save them as well. We can also delete these icons because we have the images saved. And now we're going to stretch the images. Now I'm going to do this manually, but there are other options. You could use the histogram transformation and copy the screen transfer function stretch if you want to. There's also a script in the Easy Processing Suite that is Easy Soft Stretch, but I want to do it manually. So I'm going to open histogram transformation, make sure that it is reset. Select the right file, in this case the luminance, and then remove the screen transfer function. So we're going to stretch this manually. So take the middle lever here and drag it over to the left. Apply that. Reset the tool and then repeat. But don't drag it too far to the left. Don't drag it after where the data begins. Because if you drag it beyond the data, you will clip and essentially remove data, and you don't want that. So somewhere around there, and then drag in the leftmost lever here, drag it to the left without clipping any data. Make sure that you don't exceed 1 here. You don't want this percentage to be ticking up. So that's basically it. Now we have manually stretched this image. We can now change this identifier to simply L for luminance. I'm going to save that in the nonlinear processing folder, just simply as L. And that's because I'm now starting over in the nonlinear phase. And I'm going to do the exact same thing, just add identifiers and save a file for each step. But first, we're going to continue with our stretching. We've now gone through the entire linear phase. I've manually stretched these 4, and we're now in a nonlinear state. And what I want to do now is a few things. First of all, when I'm working on these, I want to work on them in a starless version and then add stars at the end. So first of all, I'm going to make a starless version of all 4 frames. I'm also going to combine them one time just to get the LRGB stars. And then I'm going to make a starless version of that and then save my LRGB stars to be able to use them later on to integrate that into the final image. That way, the stars will be completely unaffected of any processing that is done to this image from now on. So this is basically going to take a while. The same procedure we made for the preparation of the convolution. So I'm going to start with luminance. I'm going to open up my StarNet 2 again. And I'm going to run on this and then run it on all of the other frames. And then I'm going to come back and show you the rest of the steps. The process has finished, and I have the starless versions of all 4 frames. Now I have the stars here for each frame. So I'm not actually going to use these. I will keep them anyway. And now I want to produce the LRGB stars. For that, I'm going to use the LRGB combination tool. And I will select the frames here. So LRGB. Then I'm going to execute this. Now this will of course also give you a small hint of what the finished image will look like. But we're going to adjust this quite a bit, but I see some potential in here. We got a lot of details. I think it's nice. So what we're gonna do now is that we're going to run the StarNet on this. There we go. We're not going to keep this right now, but we are going to keep the stars. So this is the LRGB star mask. And we're going to save that. Because these are the true color. If we compare it to luminance, for example, you can see that we have true color stars in here, different colors. And that is what we want when making an image like this. And that is basically the first step. Moving on to the next step. We're going to take a look at our light frames without stars. And what we need to do now before continuing in the nonlinear phase is to manage the backgrounds. You can see that we have a lot of gradients in the background here, and we don't want that moving forward in our processing. And to handle that, we're going to make a range mask covering the galaxy so that we are able to process the background without affecting the main structure here in the middle. We're going to use the luminance as our target for making this mask, and we will be able to use that mask later on for all of the frames. First thing we do here is that we go over to process, all processes, and select range selection. The goal here is to make a mask that will cover the entire galaxy, but we don't want any sharp borders between background and galaxy later on, because that will show up in the final image. So we want the transition between background and galaxy to be as smooth as possible without affecting the galaxy in our background processing. So switch on the preview and then adjust the lower limit here to incorporate the entire galaxy. And you can see that there's a fine line between only having galaxy material, having too little galaxy material, and also including a lot of background material. So I think something like that. I'm gonna resize this to fit, or I'm going to resize this to fit our preview window. It will be easier to make adjustments and to see affected areas. We can also adjust the fuzziness, and that is basically adjusting the edges. But as you can see, we're also affecting the inner core here. So make sure that you add some fuzziness to the image, but don't affect the core. It's a bit hard here on this particular image. You can also add some smoothness to smooth out the edges. I usually go for a lot of smoothness here. Well, I'm going to try something like that. Now I have my range mask. I'm going to minimize that for now. I'm going to rename that L Starless range mask. I'm going to save that just in case I lose it. And we're going to test this. So drag the range mask, apply it to the luminance. And you don't want to protect the background as we have in this image. You want to protect the galaxy. So go to mask and select invert. And we can also click on show mask to disable the preview, and we will have a clear image to adjust. So open the curves transformation, select RGB, and then click on the preview. You can now try to adjust the background here. You drag it, you can see if I adjust this up and down, I'm adjusting the background here. I don't want too much. I just want to adjust it down slightly so that I remove most of the gradients in the background. We're still going to have some gradients. It's better to not over adjust at this point, because we're going to combine this image later and we will have many other opportunities to adjust the image moving forward. This is the initial adjustment. When we also add in stars later, it will be harder to make out any residual gradients. So I'm fairly happy with this small adjustment. And if we want to do the exact same for the others, you can drag a triangle out and save an instance of this setting. Apply it to the image and inspect it to see if we're happy with that. I would say we are at this point. So we can remove the mask and we can type in BG for background and save that. So that is our luminance background adjusted. We will open the red H alpha. I'm applying the luminance mask and I'm inverting it. I'm opening this, applying this to the image, and that adjusted the background. But in this image, I think I will want to have some more adjustments than that. So I'm going to reset it and open up a preview and make a manual adjustment. Now we have adjusted the background for the 4 frames here. So far so good. Now we're actually going to combine this into an LRGB HA image. We're going to use the process, all processes, and LRGB combination. We're going to select the different frames. We have the luminance, starless background corrected. We have the red with H alpha, starless background corrected. We have the green starless background corrected, and we have the blue starless background corrected. Make sure you have the chrominance noise reduction selected here as well, and then you can execute the global. There we go. This is the first. I'm going to identify this as the HALRGB. Save that as well. So this is the first combined image showing all of the frames here. The first thing we're going to do here is we're going to make another adjustment to the background. So I'm going to try to apply the original range mask that we made, invert that. Looks fairly okay. We might have some things outside, but we'll try. Open up the curves transformation. First of all, we're going to remove all saturation outside the galaxy. And for that, we are selecting saturation, and we can look at the preview. Shouldn't affect the galaxy, it's not. But we don't want any saturation whatsoever on the background, so Remove that. Next, we want to fix the residual gradients here on the background. For that, we are selecting RGB. And we are making a subtle adjustment. Don't want too much. That was a bit much. Something like that. So the background has been fixed. If we want to, we can make some adjustments, initial adjustments on the actual galaxy here, but I think I'm going to wait until I've calibrated this for color, or adjusted the colors. So we're going to remove that mask. Going to set the identifier here to background. Going to save that. Before moving on, I'm going to make some new masks so that I can adjust the colors in here. So I'm using the color mask script. You can open that up here as well on script, utilities, and color mask. If you execute this globally, you can select a target image. You can enter a mask blur layers, and you can select blue, for example, to create a blue mask. We have a lot of blues in here. Let's minimize this for now, because I'm also going to make a red mask. Put that up here. Now I want to adjust these masks a bit, because they are fairly sharp in the edges. So I'm going to use the multi-scale linear transformation tool, but this time I'm going to add a lot of layers, 7 layers, with the settings that you see here in the interface window. You can copy these if you want to. I'm going to apply that. And as you can see, we smoothed out the edges. I'm going to save that mask, so we have it. If we close down the application, and apply it also to the red mask. And save that mask as well. So we're going to tackle the colors here. I want to adjust the entire image. It's a little bit bluish. I think I want to make it a little more saturated. So I'm gonna apply this range mask again. I'm going to invert it. No, sorry about that. I'm not going to invert it. And we are going to open up the curves transformation here. We're going to select saturation and enable our preview, and we're going to see if we can bump up the saturation on the entire galaxy. And we do that, but I'm not so happy with the image because we have a lot of blue color inside. I want to adjust and make it a bit more warmer before we adjust colors. So I'm going to experiment with the red channel here. I'm increasing that slightly, and now we're getting a more pleasing tone, I would say. Let's check on the before and after. This was before, it's a bit bluish now, and after it's a bit more reddish color, but it's a bit more neutral, I would say. But you can still make out the blues here. So now we're going to make another attempt at adjusting the saturation for the entire galaxy here and see what happens. Well, I'm letting that go for now because I don't want to blow out any HA regions here before we move forward in this processing. So I'm gonna let that go for now, and I'm going to remove that mask, and I'm going to add the red mask. And we're going to look at this. We're protecting that now, so we're going to invert that. Protect everything except for the red regions here. And now we can open up curves transformation again. I can select saturation here, and we can see what happens if we adjust this. Now we're only affecting the red areas. Bumping that up slightly. Like that. I'm going to add the blue mask here. And open the curves transformation again. Still we're having saturation. You can see if we adjust this. Going to add some saturation to the blue as well. You can also click on the blue channel to make adjustments. You see that we are adjusting the blues here. We might want to up them just a little bit to highlight these blue areas. And we might also want to make some adjustments highlighting the red areas. But we don't want to make them too red, so just a little bit. Something like that. Remove that mask. Set this to color. Save a copy. Now, there's no exact science when doing these adjustments. You will have to, you know, pick and choose what you think is okay and not okay. So I'm fairly happy with this now. We will see later on in the process, because now we haven't made any adjustments whatsoever to the noise in here, the details, etc. So we're now going to do that. Next step is that we're going to address some of the details in the image. So we're going to sharpen the image using a couple of tools. In order to do that, we need a luminance mask, and we can extract luminance by clicking on the extract CIEL component up here. Like this, but we want to adjust this a bit. So we are going to open up the histogram transformation. I'm going to select my HA LRGB BG color L, and that is the new luminance frame that I just created. I'm going to drag this left a bit to the right here, but before I'm doing that, I'm going to click on the preview. I'm going to drag this in, making the background just a little bit darker. It's okay to clip some information here, it's fine. I'm also going to drag the middle lever here to the right to lower the brightness slightly on this luminance. Like that. Now I can take this luminance and drag it onto our main image. And I can show the mask. I can also invert it, but I don't want to apply sharpening to the background, so I will invert it back. You want to use this mask on the details and galaxy only, so use it as originally applied, don't invert it. You can click on show mask to get a better look at what you're doing. And then you open the multiscale linear transformation tool. For this now, we're not using noise reduction. We are enhancing the details. So we have the starlet transformation algorithm. We still have dyadic layers. We have 4 of them. But as you can see here, for the first layer, we don't do basically anything. The second layer, we have a 0.1. The third, 0.1. The fourth, 0. And you don't have any noise reduction whatsoever. Apply that to the image. Now we can zoom in and we can view what happened here. We select an area with some details, like here, for example. We can undo this. You see that it's a bit fuzzy, and if I redo it, it's a bit sharpened, but very, very slightly sharpened. And that is okay. We don't want to over sharpen things here. So you can close the multi-scale linear transformation tool now. And we're going to use the next process, and that is unsharp mask. I'm going to use a couple of values. You can play around with these yourself. I usually use 0.9 and 0.8, and we target the lightness here. And exactly the same as before, keep this luminance mask on for this as well, because you don't want to apply this to the entire image. So execute that as well. You can zoom in here on this area. We can undo it and redo it. You see that we have also a bit more sharpening with this tool, but ever so slightly. Now we can remove this mask, and I want to set this identifier to sharp. That means sharpening, of course, so I know that some sharpening has been applied to the image. Now we want to address the noise, because there's a bit noise. There's noise in this image here, and we want to address that. And one tool you can use then is the TGV denoise, but that also require a couple of masks. So first of all, we want a luminance mask, and we don't want to make any adjustments to that. So I'm calling it a lum mask, and I'm making a copy of this luminance mask now. I'm saving the luminance mask here. I'm making a copy of this, naming this TGV mask, because this TGV mask I'm going to have to process a bit for this denoise to work properly. So the TGV mask is going to be a low contrast mask. So I'm opening up curves transformation. I'm selecting RGB and resetting this, and I want to drag this left side up, or simply select it and start dragging it up, and then I can type in 0.2 here in the output window. So it jumps up to 0.2. On the right side, I want to start dragging it down, but then type in 0.5. So it will jump down to there. I want to get a line like this. Then apply that to the mask. As you can see, it turns grayish. It's a very low contrast mask. So you can close this curves transformation. And what you want to do next is to open up the histogram transformation. Make sure that the tool is reset. Make sure that you have the TGV mask selected. And now you take this middle lever here and drag it and place it exactly on the peak of the histogram. Then apply that to the mask as well. So you want to end up with a mask looking something like this. Low contrast and with some increased brightness. Before moving on, I'm going to apply this mask to the image, and I'm going to invert the mask. Then I'm going to open up the TGV denoise tool. Now we use it in CIE mode. I'm using it on lightness and with a strength of 4, edge protection 2, and smoothness 2 with 500 iterations. And I want to use a local support image, and that is the luminance mask that we made. And don't confuse this with the TGV mask, because that is applied to the image, and the luminance mask is the local support. So drag this over to the image. When that has finished, we can look at the results here. If we select an area that had a lot of noise, maybe somewhere up here, zoom in here and we undo the TGV denoise, you can see that we have some noise here, and after it has been slightly smoothed out, but you don't want to overdo it, because if you apply too much noise reduction, you will also remove some of the sharpness that you had in the image here. So I would say a fine balance between sharpness and noise. Well, since this TGV denoise tool takes a long time, you could make a preview window and apply it to that, just like we did earlier in the linear phase. So you can, if you want to, apply a small preview window, and you can run the TGV denoise on that window first before you decide if you're happy or not with the settings. Now, I've run this so many times that I know that these settings are fairly good, and they're something that I normally use. So I'm going to remove this mask. I'm going to name it noise, so that I know that I now have applied background adjustments, color adjustments, I've sharpened the image, and I've removed some noise in the image. Left to do now is final color corrections. Now this is before we introduce the stars back, because after you have introduced the stars, it will be hard to make adjustments to the galaxy here without affecting the stars that is going to be visible inside of the galaxy. So I would recommend that you make all of your final color corrections before adding the stars back. You can of course make curves adjustments, contrast adjustments, and so on after the stars have been added back. And you should as well, because you introduce some brightness when you add frames together in pixel math later. I sometimes also use a script to enhance dark structures, and I'm thinking we're going to test that here as well to see if I want to use that. It's under script and utilities, and it's called the dark structure enhance. And you basically go with the default settings. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep this, but you can see here we have a lot of dark structures here. If I remove that, you can see that these were enhanced, but very much so. So I'm thinking maybe we want to do that again, but not as much. I'm going to use 0.20 as amount for each iteration as well. Still, it might be well, I'm not sure. It's a personal preference. It did some enhancements over here and some over there. Well, I might keep that. We call that structure, so I know that I have made some of those adjustments. I'm going to look into the colors here. It's time to do some final adjustments before adding stars to this image. The first thing that I notice is that the image in total is lacking in depth. I really need some more colors in here. I really need to increase the saturation. So I'm gonna apply this range mask that we've used in the past. We're gonna make sure that it is protecting the background this time, because we don't want to increase the saturation on the background, even though I don't think we have any colors left. I think we do that anyway. We're going to open up curves transformation. We're going to make sure that we have saturation selected, and we are going to open up a preview. And I think we're going to increase this a fair amount, because you see when we have it down here, it's a bit flat. If we push it up here, it's really starting to come alive. But we don't want overblown sections like we do have in these HA regions right now. So we're gonna increase it a little bit. And then we are going to maybe some more. I think we are starting to be fairly happy with that, I think. Yeah, What we're going to do next then is that I'm going to remove that mask. I'm going to add another color to this image, so we have a final new image here. Now we're going to combine this image with our stars. So I'm going to make a copy of this. I'm going to name it Starless. And we're going to take our stars. Where do we have the stars? I think I closed the stars. So we're gonna have to open the LRGB stars. So we're going to make 2 copies of this because we're going to experiment. So normal for that one. That is the original size of the stars. And we're going to make a small version of the stars. And for that, we're going to dial them back a bit. So we're going to open up Curves Transformation, and we're going to click RGB and a preview window. And I'm going to drag this down to about here. And we're going to compare the small version versus the normal version. You can see that the stars are a bit dialed back in this comparison to that one. And well, you can, if you want to, adjust the colors of the stars, but personally I don't want them to be overwhelming when combining this with the galaxy image. So for the combination, I'm gonna use a pixel math formula like the one I have down here. And I want to combine stars with the starless. And I have 2 versions here. So first I'm starting with the stars in the normal version. And that looks something like this. And I'm also going to make a version with the small stars. And that looks like this. So now we have to decide, how do we proceed with this image here? Do we want to go with the smaller version of the stars? Or do we want to go with the original sized stars? I think we will go with the original size for this. So let me set an identifier, HALRGB. So I have an HALRGB image with LRGB stars. I'm going to save that. Now I can make some final adjustments if I want to. Or if I'm happy with the image, I can adjust some curves, because when you add the images together, it adds some brightness. You see, you have a little bit of a glow on the image here. So I'm going to open up the curves transformation and the preview. And I'm going to increase the contrasts a bit and dial back on the brightness. Something like that. If I want to, here I can also play with the colors and saturation one last time. For example, if I want to try and increase the saturation a bit more, I don't think I want to. I think I'm pretty happy with the level of saturation in there right now. I could do a final check on the colors using the red and blue mask here. So I'm gonna apply the blue mask to this image. And I will do a check to see if I want to adjust the blues or not. Well, maybe I'll adjust a little bit. Let's take a look at the before and after. That was just a very, very subtle change. So I'm going to check on the reds as well. See if I want to adjust that. So I really need to be careful with this red, because it's already a fairly high amount. Just ever so slightly. We have some intense regions here in the galaxy. Let's remove that mask. Save that image. Well, I think I'm basically fairly happy with the end result here. There we have the end result. It's the Andromeda Galaxy Messier 31 in HA LRGB, and that is about 4.5 hours of luminance, 4.5 hours of HA data, and 40 minutes of RGB data, all combined into one. Thank you so much for watching this video, and if you like it, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel to be sure not to miss out on upcoming content. If you want to support me and the making of these videos, there is an option listed in the video description. Until the next video, I wish you have clear skies.